Okay, welcome to the final fly tying techniques online presentations that we've been doing. Um, Jack asked me if I would be interested in running this again come fall, and I said, yeah, let's start in October instead of December. And he says, whatever you want to do. So I'll be looking for tires and all the help that I can get on this. So with that, I want to introduce our presenter for this evening. It's Gunnar Brammer. Lives in Duluth, Minnesota, where some of the greatest warm water streams of the Midwest converge with the cold waters of Lake Superior. He was a latecomer to fly fishing and fishing in general. He first became interested in fishing by means of a summer trip to Canada with family and friends at the age of 14. The trip quickly became an annual, and by the end of our second year, I was the sole member of the group that hadn't caught a northern pike. It was that very year that his father and his friend had chased pike on the fly, and their stories of massive pike rolling over the lily pads, trying to chase down their frog imitations, totally captivated him, to say the least. So he concluded that fly fishing would be the answer to catching his first ever pike. The year that followed was filled with hours of casting practice and time behind the tying vise.
And untying wind knots. Don't forget untying wind knots.
Okay.
Just throw that out there.
Having received his first 5-weight fly rod, tying vise, and tying starter kit. By the following season, he was caught up and up to speed after reading Kelly Gallup's Streamers for Modern Trout, good book, and was armed with a 6-weight and a 200 grain full sinking line and a box full of unique streamers. Many pike were landed and fuel was added to his passionate fire. Years later, he found himself surrounded by the mountain peaks with the deafening roar of the waters of the Madison River. As he started his first day at the Gallup Slide Inn. That summer, working for Kelly was life-changing. He fished 7 days a week and likely tied even more often if that were possible. Each night he'd stay awake at the vise with the same and only movie he had running in the background as he'd try to create the perfect streamer. And summer waned. He headed back to Michigan for his final semester at Michigan Tech, but the passion for his tying streamers never left him. Following year, he remained in the Midwest working as a wildlife field tech, stationed a short distance away from Boulder Junction, Wisconsin. Although he enjoyed reminiscing about the aggressive brown trout that he left behind in the mountains of the Madison Valley, he was far more content to chase the toothy creatures that he'd fallen in love with from the very beginning. Pike and muskie became an obsession that he still has today, and has greatly shaped his tying efforts over the past few years. Later that fall in 2015, he started Brammer's Custom Flies and started down the path of becoming a commercial tyer. His obsession is foremost with bait fish patterns ranging from 3-inch smallmouth patterns all the way up to 14-inch beast style musky flies and offshore flies, with everything in between. Over the past few years of commercial tying, he's thoroughly explored every avenue worthy of being considered a streamer, from synthetics to naturals, tubes to shanks, and single hook to multi-articulated flies. He has shared everything worth sharing on his YouTube channel. Unfortunately, with a young and growing family, he no longer has the time to operate in that capacity of a commercial tyer, but has been truly blessed to spend time behind the vise perfecting his craft. Recently, he joined the Rio Fly Signature tying team and works diligently to provide them and all of you with the most successful patterns he can. He now has the privilege of traveling the country to teach the art of streamer tying and streamer design. His flies have been featured in multiple magazines as well as a handful of books over the past few years. You can follow him on Instagram, and I'll put these in the chat, his Instagram and YouTube channel and his website, so you can get those, rather than me reading them here. He's a Rio Fly Signature Tire, an ambassador for Rio Fly Lines, and a member of the pro team for HMH Vices, Hedron Incorporated, and a friend of Arex Hooks. And with that, I'm gonna go ahead and spotlight you, Gunner. And the floor is yours.
Ooh, all right. Well, thank you, Rick. And thank you, everybody, for having me. I have been brought here this evening to talk to you all about Bucktail. And Bucktail is something I have a soft spot for, because as we kind of went over that bio, which, Rick, I didn't know you were just going to read the bio, man. It was like having to relive not catching pike for 2 years in Canada. It's a brutal memory. But what's really interesting is I went from this Midwest pike-minded realm to working for Kelly. And Kelly Gallup was really that first, not only mentor, but just inspiration, source of information, right? So like when I get into fly fishing, I don't know nothing about dry flies, nothing about nymphs, nothing about the history, like wet fly swing and Atlantic salmon flies and all the European traditions and classic kind of fly tying stuff. I'm like, all fly fishermen fish 200 grain full sinking lines for brown trout with 6-inch flies. Right, that's like day one. That's my mindset already. Like I'm just broken right from the get-go. There's no hope for Gunner to really stay a trout guy, because it's just like as soon as you touch streamers and I can make a bait fish, well, it's like now I can fish for barracuda and striped bass and shark and peacocks and pike and smallmouth and largemouth and bowfin and gar. Like the whole world of fly fishing just branched out to every species on the planet that eats other fish in shallow water, right? It's like, whoa, that got real big real fast. And so when I started my business, oddly enough, I started as a articulated trout specialist streamer, right? Because I just spent 4 months in Montana, and all I did was tie articulated trout flies in the Kelly Gallup style. So it was like, basically I made my job to imitate respectfully, but basically to knock off Kelly Gallup streamers. That's what I did for like 4 years until I found Bob Popovich's book, Fly Design. And so the first thing you need to know about this presentation, and literally anything you see me talk about that has to do with bucktail, is I am a secondary teacher. Not that I teach high school, but like it's secondary information being passed down from Bob Popovich, who pioneered it, developed it, progressed it. And he has a resource for you if you have like a fly tying library and books and like to collect this stuff. And his book is called Fly Design. And he's got 2 books, but Fly Design specifically addresses bucktail, bucktail technique, and almost all of his patterns, from bucktail deceivers, bulkheads, hollow flies, beasts, the works. And so I would highly recommend it, like 11 out of 10 stars recommend it. And if you pair that book, hopefully, with any of my video series tonight, all the videos on my YouTube channel, I have a whole page dedicated to bucktail on my website, which is just streamersbygunner.com. But you'll have the written information direct from the source with the audio video information so you can see it being done. And hopefully it'll just make bucktail click. Because before we started the session, we were talking about where to find bucktail and at a good price. And I started immediately describing how different bucktail can be. Right, is the first thing out of my mouth. Well, there's a lot of variance. Some of it's long and some soft and some stiff, and some people grade it differently, and some has more trapped air and some of it's wavy. And what you're going to see tonight is no matter what information I give you, if you don't have some hands-on experience with bucktail, it's going to be difficult for you to apply it right away, because there's this learning curve of figuring out what the hair is going to do and how it's going to behave to meet your need. So even with tonight and everything we're going to do, which my goal is to literally teach every bucktail technique I can think of and put that into a recipe. And it's not a unique recipe. It's one I did maybe like 5 or 6 years ago called well, it's essentially an extended body bulkhead. But it's got straight ties, it's got hollow ties, it's got reverse hollow tie / bulkhead, and then we're going to do a dubbing loop with Bucktail. And the point of it is, yes, the recipe is very effective, and I hope you'll tie it and play with it. But ultimately, each technique can be used to build its own recipes, and each technique can be a standalone spot in a fly. And so the presentation gets to hit home on each technique, extrapolate on how that can be built into different patterns, like a straight up hollow fly or a beast or a bulkhead or a bucktail deceiver, but then also be put together into one format where I can literally teach all the techniques in one pattern. And yet that's a very fishable, extremely successful pattern. So with that in mind, I have just a few notes so that I don't get lost, but I tend to get really wordy in the intros. So you got to bear with me, because all I'm trying to do is make sure that we are all on the same playing field and the context is there for the tying demo to be received as the best it can be received, right? If I just go right into the tying demo, but I don't talk about like the hair characteristics or different places on the hair to get certain materials, basically you're going to hear everything tonight twice. But once you're going to hear it so that everything's contextualized, and then you're going to see it in the application. So because Bucktail is so variable, and this is a really hard thing to teach, but it's something I have been able to observe in my child, which has just been really cool. And so I have a 6-year-old. He's going to be 6 in 3 days. And he loves Transformers. He thinks it's the greatest television show of all time, right? And like the 1970s version, like super old school Transformers. And when we play with Legos, he will just take random Legos and build a robot. And if you give him like something that we made so that all the pieces are the same and there's like 2 of everything, he'll break it down and turn it into a robot. And if you give him blocks, he'll make a robot. And if you give him like pipe cleaners, he'll make a robot. And I don't know how he does it, but he can he sees through whatever medium he's got, and he can make this robot. And when you observe children do this amazing thing where they actually play. They're unbelievably creative. It's untamed creativity. Now, when we get older, we tend to look at creativity like creativity has to do with intelligence, but it doesn't. Creativity is rooted in this ability to explore and play with things. And when you get with Bucktail, because Bucktail is so variable, you can't get locked into recipes. And I don't know how hard to stress this, because when I teach a class in person and I give a long-winded intro like this and I look across the room and I got 20 eyeballs that are kind of glossing over because they're like, come on, come on, come on, come on. It's like, I know, but I don't want you focused on what did he do next? What did he do next? What's the next step? Where did he put that hair? That stuff's not going to help you with Bucktail, because your Bucktail is different than mine. And as soon as I do it, you're going to have to do it slightly differently at slightly different spacing. You have to react to the hair. And the best way I can describe that is playing. You have to be able to play with it. Now, so if you just forget about the world of fishing for just a second and just try to get the hair to do what you want, even at the sacrifice of making crap flies for the next 20 ties, forget it. Just allow yourself to play with the hair, let the hair do what it wants, and be cognizant of what it's doing and try to figure out what. Hopefully this video will give you all the tools to diagnose certain things so that you can learn it quickly, because this took me 5 years of commercial tying to learn, right? And not everybody can do that. Not everybody can tie 40 hours a week for 4 or 5 years straight to get that level of experience with one material. That's insane. But if I can create a resource that will help you do it in 20 repetitions, take me up on that. That's a lot better than 5 years. 20 repetitions of just burning through some tail is a lot better than 5 years of trying to figure it out. So video resources, Bob Pop, play with it, because variation forces you to react to what you have, not what I have, and following recipe is not going to work for you. Okay. So the first thing that I think distinguishes bucktail above every other tying material besides other deer materials like belly hair is the fact that it's hollow. So this hair is compressible, but the length of this rawhide, it is not equally compressible at all sections. And people get in a lot of trouble here because they think when a recipe calls for bucktail, they can just grab any bucktail. But down here, this responds like deer belly hair. As soon as you touch this with your tying thread, it's gonna pop and flare. Now, I can use that to my advantage to finish a fly, make a bulkhead, use it in a dubbing loop. It's very compressible. That's excellent. You're gonna see this. This is my finishing hair on almost every fly pattern that I tie. Now you have these moderately compressible fibers that are also a little bit stiffer. Now that's pretty cool because if it's moderately compressible, I can tie it in and get some flare out of the hair on its own. And on the same time, it's also moderately stiff. So if I do reverse tie it, which we're going to get to, I can control that pretty confidently because it's going to push against my thread. Does that make sense? It's not so stiff that it's going to be hard to force backwards, but it's not so limp that if I force it backwards a little bit, it's going to compress and reflare and I'm going to lose control. Moderate stiffness, moderate compressibility, perfect for hollow tying and building bucktail deceivers. When you get to the tip, this is usually fairly dead. Now that's kind of ideal if you think about it for tying in the tail section of a baitfish pattern, which I don't want to flare and I don't want the silhouette to spring out. Or for tying a clouser, tying stabilizer wings on classic hair wing patterns. Right? This becomes infinitely useful to start patterns or to tie single wing or double wing patterns in kind of the classic sense, but not really beyond that because it doesn't create volume on its own and it's a little bit too stiff to turn backwards. It becomes, you can do it, it's just exceedingly difficult. So understand that not all hair on the tail is equal and it has different levels of compressibility and different levels of stiffness, being usually the springiest and softest, moderate stiff and stiffest as you move away from the animal. So this is attached to the animal as you get towards the tip. That's the way that's oriented. Aside from that, bucktail is a tapered fiber. And what I mean by tapered, what did I do with it? I mean, it's tapered like your fly rod, right? And so when you fly cast, naturally you know this, but the butt section doesn't usually bend that much, does it? Most of that action is in the tip of the fiber. Now, this is the coolest thing about bucktail because it's a straight hair, like kind of all synthetics function that way, but none of those are tapered, are they? And the only way to build kind of bulk and density with synthetic is with more and more material or by crimping it and all this thing. But hair, because it's compressible, as soon as you touch it with the thread, it flares. It maintains its volume because it's rigid at the base, but the tip of it flexes and swims and breathes in the water. So bucktail has this amazing, unique ability to be able to create the illusion of bulk, bulk without bulk, to be able to take it, literally turn it backwards. You can leave it at 90 degrees and what happens? So I can get maximum volume out of this material and yet it still swims and breathes and comes to life. The fact that bucktail is tapered is unbelievably useful for a tying realm for making huge flies that cast and swim. Now, because it's tapered, there's kind of a rule that Bob Pop invented, which is you always use the hair at full length. So if you need long hair, you have to have a bucktail with long hair. And if you need short hair, you have to have a bucktail with short hair. Because if you take the butt section, when you take a material and you cut it shorter, you're never going to cut the tip off. You want all that limp stuff and all that different tip lengths. That's all good. But you're going to cut the butt section, in which case you lost the compressibility because it's only compressible down here. Now you're not going to get any flare. If you don't have any volume, you're not going to get any action out of the tip. If you take short hair or long hair and you cut it to the length you need, you're going to ruin the fiber. You always want to have from the tail, from the source, the length you need. Now you'll see me cut the hair, but all I'm doing is I have like a bunch of butt ends that aren't the same and I'm just making a clean line for my thread to catch. I am not trying to introduce taper or shorten it or nothing. I'm just trying to make it clean. That's all I'm doing. So you never want to take a long fiber and cut it short because you just lost all the hollow, all the bulk, all the flare, and now the tip's just gonna not do anything. You're not gonna get the swim out of the hair.
You ready for a quick question?
Sure.
Does the location of the hair also dictate the amount of floatability?
I have never tried to select it for that quality, outside of a happy accident. So because I use the part with the most trapped air to build my heads because it reacts the best to my thread, I tend to get the most buoyant hair at the head. Now, when we go over technique, you're going to have two techniques that kind of essentially radiate through the whole spectrum, which is just tying it in straight, right? You take a clump and it goes the way you want, or tying in essentially, I said that wrong. That's not what I'm talking about. What am I talking about? Let me show you one. So if you look at this fly, if you broke it down, it's not technically true because there's something hiding underneath. But do you see how the hair in the front doesn't have a lot of volume and it's kind of just tied straight back? Now, on most flies tied in this style, what you have is you have a lack of buoyancy at the head, but you have this huge hook shank and all of this weight leveraging forward. And almost all these flies tied in a true bucktail deceiver fashion or a hollow fly without a bulky head are all going to dip head first. Now they're going to be like basically slow sinking flies because all the resistance is hanging off the back of the hook. So all the drag is back here and all of the weight is right up front on that hook shank. There's nothing to stop that from stalling head first. So when you accidentally take the most buoyant part of the tail to make a head that's super bulky, and you can even see the line of bucktail butts in here from where I turned it backwards, you now have a head with the most buoyant part supporting it, and it'll essentially suspend slowly, perfectly level. Now that it functions and changes, if you change the shank length or the wire gauge, and obviously how dense it is. And so that's something you have to do, 20 times and test them all and see what works for you. But that for me is a happy accident. I'm not choosing that material to get the buoyancy. I'm choosing it for the tying characteristics. It just happens to be the most buoyant at the same time, which functions to control how the fly behaves if it dips nose first or rides level. Is that all right? Satisfactory? Let me know, William. So we already went over stiffness. We went over full length tapered, trapped air. So tying techniques. I will take the fly rod tip back out because it makes sense. So if you just assume we're just going to draw a horizon, that's my hook shank. So you have a bucktail deceiver tying technique where the hair is always going to go from butt to tip in that same direction, and you're essentially just going to layer it up. And one of the cool things about bucktail, because we're always using it at full length, if you take it from the same tail, the distance between your tips, between this section and the next stack and the next stack, is going to be the same distance that it is on the hook shank. If you were to draw a picture of this, the distance between your tie-in points is going to be the same distance between your tips. And so what you can do is, because you're always using it at full length, you can gauge and build a perfectly tapered bait fish very quickly. It becomes a little bit tricky when we do a hollow tie and we flip this around backwards because you have to visualize how the hair is literally going to flex under that arc, and match all your different arcs as we go. But I think that's enough background, and we'll dive into the tying demo. And the first thing I kind of want to hit home on is the fact that I'm going to do an extended body tie. And so if you look at a hook shank, you're limited to the hook shank, right? Like there's only one place to put material. And the problem with bucktail is most people are going to have 4-inch hair, 4.5-inch hair. And so you can't build a 6, 6.5, 7-inch fly. Now, not everybody is going to be into 6.5, 7, 8-inch flies. Up here fishing for pike and muskie, like 10, 11, 12 inches. Like this is, I don't even bat an eye at this anymore. This isn't big to me. This is like, I will blind cast this with a 10 weight for 8 hours and not think twice that that's a big fly. But the purpose of doing it big in the demo is, 1, to teach extended body tying, 2, so that I can show all the different tying techniques. And 3, because it's very easy to scale down, but if you don't have the technique to scale it up, you're limited. So it's just easier to start big and understand that you can take away the shanks and just tie in the hook. But the problem with bucktail that a lot of people run into is a 4-inch bucktail deceiver doesn't quite hit it. And of course, you should be doing this kind of match the hatch tying where you have a specific forage base in mind that you're trying to imitate. So you should know the length, you should know the volume of it, at least generally, so that you can gauge how long this extension needs to be. But extended body tying is simply taking a shank, or it could be monofilament, or it could be a tube fly, doesn't really matter. But you're going to tie on something that's literally going to be attached to the back of this hook to increase the tying space. So I can take 4-inch hair and I can put it, let me just switch cameras. That'd be way easier to do if I just switched cameras. So if you look at this, you know, and I'll take a clump of like 4-inch hair here. This is a big 6/0. This is a partridge 6/0 Universal Predator X. And if I take this 4-inch hair and I put 4-inch hair on here, well, I can make, I don't know, 4 inches plus a 1.5-inch hook shank, so a 5.5-inch baitfish pattern. But if I need to make a 6-inch baitfish pattern or a 7-inch baitfish pattern, I can simply take a shank, or in this case, we're going to use a handful of shanks, and I can extend the body of that fly. I can create tying space behind the fly in the simplest manner possible. I can take 2 shanks and extend the body of the fly. So extended body fly tying is going to let you take that shorter material behind the fly to increase the overall length of the fly pattern. Now, the problem is you can both overcomplicate it and oversimplify it, and kind of both errors are frustrating. So when you get to extended body tying, you can just take like a single shank. That's probably the easiest, like a 35 mil shank, 40 mil shank. And that way you don't have to deal with it. But one of the coolest things that Bob Pop does is it's called a beast fly. And the beast fly is really just a huge hollow fly. That's all it is. But what you can see is the body's extended on monofilament. And he developed kind of a simple rule of spacing where the distance between my stacks here, which is also the distance between my tips up here to create uniform taper, is about 1/2 inch. Now, if you take like a shank that's about 15 millimeters, that's pretty close to 1/2 inch. It's about 5/8 of an inch. So if I have a bunch of 15 millimeter shanks, like these Flyman articulated shanks, or maybe they're fish spines, I forget, that are exactly 15 millimeters, I can just put 1 stack on this, and then I can take another one and put a stack on that, and then I can just take another one and put a stack on that. And I have essentially, I'm mirroring his spacing, and I can build this perfect tip taper profile on a shank extended body, because everybody has shanks and every fly shop sells shanks. So it's not really a big investment cost for anybody to get into a new style, and you don't have to learn any new techniques like tying on monofilament, which is crazy tricky. And now you can extend the body of a fly with nearly perfect spacing. So that's how we're going to demo it. It typically looks like this, where you see I have 1/2 inch dots. And what I'll do is, if you use something, because I just explained this, so you'll see I'll get almost exactly 1/2 inch for one of these shanks. And this is what I mean by you can easily overcomplicate it, right? Like if you take a longer shank, you got to watch where the double R bends connect. Make sure that that's not connecting over a dot, right? If you're going to follow the 1/2 inch spacing, you need to make sure that all 1/2 inches fit on the shank and they're not screwing up with where your connections are, so that everything just runs nice and smooth. So we'll pop this guy out. We'll pop a shank in. I'll show you a really neat trick here, because one of the biggest issues with tying on shanks that I find is people tend to try to tie where the 2 wires come together, which is a complete pain in the butt, especially when it's really close to your vise. And so I'm going to tie right up here behind the hook eye, and I'm going to leave all of this undressed, because for right now in this bucktail pattern, it doesn't matter. The whole point of bucktail patterns is we're generating external silhouette, and you can see the internals are left completely naked. It's like a skeletalized version of a fly. which is like almost the opposite of when you like tie a nymph for a dry fly, and there's always some sort of body material and a counter rib and maybe a little bit of flash in there. It's like this is skeletalized. It's only the external silhouette that we care about. So I can take a shank like this and I will close it, which becomes more important when you start obviously putting them together. But I'm going to leave that whole wire section essentially naked, and I'm not going to dress it. I'm not going to put anything on it because I only care about the outside of the fly. Now, when I come in with my hair, because we went over different levels of compressibility, I'm going to come up kind of towards the tip section because I don't want a lot of flare. I want the tail of that pattern to kind of be as slicked back straight as possible with the least amount of volume to start generating the taper that's going to build volume from there. Now, when you cut this off the hide, there's going to be kind of medium long, and long fibers. And I kind of only want the medium long. There's also going to be something that would be like insulative hair, which is kind of just wasteful. And if you've ever tied with belly hair and stacked bass bugs, you know to clean out the butts, right? You know to clean out the hair because the insulative fibers is not only going to stop the hair from compressing, so you're not going to get good bite, you're not going to guarantee that it's attached well and it's not going to slip and all this stuff, but it can also break your thread and cut your thread. So I will take a section of tip hair. And because we're going to do kind of 1/2 inch spacing, because this is going to build and build and build on top of itself, think sparse, just layered sparseness, because all the layers overlap. I'm going to take those kind of butt sections and twist my fingers. You see them open up, and I can take out both short stuff and kind of just wasted trash that I don't need. That's a little bit denser than I want. And then I can just kind of clean these up. And this is what I meant to introduce here. When I cut this, I'm only cleaning it up. I'm only interested in cleaning it up, not shortening it, because I got to use it at the full length. And I cut this kind of scarily close to my fingers. That's not a lot of working room. That's something you got to build up to. But the hardest thing for people to kind of get naturally is actually this, applying it to the shank and keeping these butts vertical. It's actually really hard. Most people come in and they're trying to figure out like what the heck is wrong with my hand and my vise. And if you've never tried it, seriously, like cut off some hair and try it. It'll mess with you. But you have to figure out how to mold your hand to that vise so that you get a nice clean vertical catch on these butts. Now, when you catch your bucktail, right now I'm tying on monofilament, which is round. Round is going to be extremely important for a bunch of reasons, but first off, I don't have to spin this. I don't have to take a flat thread and cord it up to make it round. And I want it round so that all the pressure actually compresses the hair, because you can't compress hair with a flat thread. It's not going to work. So I don't have to spin this. So when I come up, my thread's not going to have free twist, or it's not going to fall forward or fall backwards, but I can actually just control it supernaturally, come up with slack, and pull straight down. Now I'm going to take the same thread path 2 or 3 times. And something I did is, you can see how the butts are flaring up like an elk hair caddis. I compressed the hair already. The hair's compressed. It's not lashed down. I didn't suck all the slack out, but I put a crease in the hair. And the reason I put a crease in the hair is because my bucktail butts right now are like a 1/16 of an inch long, and I don't want anything to slip out the back as I go to move this around the hook. So because I creased it, it's just going to follow that crease as I manipulate it and mess with it and beat the crap out of it. Because it's creased, it can't slip out or slip one way or the other. The diameter of the mono is 6/1000 of an inch. It's Danville fine monofilament tying thread. That's suitable for probably 99.9 of all streamers, period. I also do have a Vivus. Do I have a Vivus? Sorry, I'm answering a question in the comments there. This is, you can see it's measured in millimeters. It's like 0.2 millimeters, but that's 0.008 of an inch. That's really big stuff. It's kind of like equivalent to GSP, but the 6,000 Danville is super prime. So right now the hair's just on top. Now that should be useful right there. If you're tying in a stabilizer wing or something, You might want to just keep it on top, in which case I'll put my fingers underneath so it doesn't roll around the hook, suck all the slack down and tie it in. But right now, because we're building a 360-degree symmetrical bait fish, I'm going to take my thumbnail and I'm just going to shove it on top of that crease joint that I made. And you're going to see the hair pop up on my laptop, sorry. The hair is going to wrap around that hook shank, and I'm going to beat it up the same way you kind of pack a snowball. You're just going to kind of push from all directions, right? If you just push and push and push and push, you make a pancake, and that's no bueno. But you should also just be aware that, hey, I can make a pancake, right? I told you to play with your hair. You can make different shapes with the bucktail. You can make a high and tight bait fish pattern. You can make a wide bait fish pattern, but the goal to begin with should be circular, because if you can make it circular and it's perfectly even, then you can diverge from there. So the pressure is random, pushing in all directions. I'm going to support my shank eye, because if you tie bass bugs, I'm going to suck all that slack out. And if the longer that shank gets, or the longer that hook gets, the more leverage it has on your vise jaws, the harder that is on your vise to hold without slipping. So if you can support this with your finger, now there's no pressure on my vise jaws. It's supported in the back and the front. And I'm going to take that thread and just suck all the slack out. Now what's cool is mono thread is elastic. And so it stretches. If you've ever pulled your leader and stretched your leader to take the memory out, you're really familiar with this. And you get so used to it, you know exactly how hard you can pull, which is important because I know what maximum compressibility is. I'm never like, is it tied down enough? Like, you can stretch that, get perfect compressibility out of these butts, and know that that's tied down as good as you can. And then I'm just going to come forward and tie that off. So that is essentially a bucktail deceiver tie. Now, if this was a hook shank, what you would do is you would kind of, because you're not extending the body, I'm going to have to try to find long tail, medium tail, short tail. I don't have as much room to generate the taper, so I have to have more tails available to me. But because we're extending the body and we're going to have all these different tie-in points to create the taper, I'm going to use the same tail, because now my tapered tips are happening because of the distance and my tie-in points. So I am going to dress this up and just have some fun with it. I'm going to take some flash. This is called wing and flash. What's really cool about wing and flash is it's shredded. It's like super thin, right? Or you might be familiar with Angelina fiber if you're a saltwater guy. But essentially it blends in with the hair. If you ever tie with like really thick flash boo, you'd be familiar with the fact that it kind of strands itself out, and you can see these big thick strands in the water. And sometimes that's totally acceptable. But what's really cool is when the flash blends with the hair, so that it's not these big thick strands like this lateral line flash. You can see that's a big thick strand, but this has flash throughout that's super subtle. You see that reflecting? It's super subtle. And it just looks like the real deal in the water. It's unbelievable how cool that looks. So I just threw some flash in. It was a little sloppy, but I'm not too worried about it right now. And then when we were getting ready for this, in the intro lobby, I just ripped some hackles off. And they're just super thin saddles from a really undesirable kind of saddle I found at a show. And I'm not going to make these super long past the bucktail, maybe like an inch at most. And there's a way, and this is something I should hit home on, is just the fact that this is every time I do this, I probably do it differently. And I'm not really going to teach the hackle stuff, because I'm literally just going to lash these on. They're so thin and so small. I'm not worried about the concavity or how they're laying or the way they look. It's just putting nice, limp, subtle tips past the end of that bucktail, just to get a little bit more swim and taper out of the back here. The webbier these are, the more I care about how they lay on the fly. And that's perfect right there. Just 5 hackles in the round, one essentially on each side of that, with a little bit of flash to make a super slick little simple tail. And so you can actually use your dry fly hackles for that. I know that might be like sacrilegious, but you can totally use dry fly saddle for that. The thinner it is, the less water weight it has. And really what you're looking for is you just want these nice thin tips sticking out the back for a little bit of extra flutter and movement. It's quite a bit different than like tying in the musky style. So I would call that like saltwater style, these really thin dry fly hackles. Whereas musky style tends to be thick schlopping that's super webby. And you're actually using the web to create the illusion of a tail. This didn't add any bulk. It didn't add any silhouette to it whatsoever. It just added movement. All that added was movement. This has literally a tail made out of hackle. That's very pike and musky oriented. But if you kind of know my philosophy on bait fish patterns, they're one and the same. It doesn't matter. Muskies love saltwater flies, and saltwater fish eat musky flies. They just don't cast the same. So I'm going to tilt this up to deal with my shank series here. And so we're coming in, we're matching that 1/2 inch spacing developed by Pop. And you could see how much of a pain in the butt this would be to try to tie way back there on the double R bend, or to even try to tie in the middle of the shank, and my vise is in the way and I have all this stuff going on. But you got to remember, skeletalized fly, outside silhouette only. I got a tag in sticking in there somewhere. And so I'm going to come right up to the hook eye. And now this distance, this 15 mil is like, I don't know, again, 5/8 of an inch or so. That's going to be the distance in my tip. So I'm going to get long hair to about right here. And every stage is going to build this perfect tip. Because if you remember with the fly rod demo, it's the tip that moves. And so if I can just have uniform tips, bleeding into tips, bleeding into tips, dude, it is the fishiest, swimmiest little fly you've ever seen. Now I can start to kind of come down. I want a little bit more flare. So I'm going to get away from the tip section a little bit. Come down to this kind of upper third between 1/3 and 2/3. This is what I call the sweet spot. You can see this whole side is naked because I favor it so much. Like there's nothing left on this side, but we're going to get a little bit more flare and a little bit better characteristics for building volume without manipulating it in any way. We're not going to hollow tie it. We're not going to bulkhead tie it. We're just going to pick hair on a different place of the tail to get a slightly different response to keep this going forward. And again, I just took all that crap out. Since I already did this once, I'm going to move just a little bit faster. Going to clean up those butts. I'm going to get a super clean, precise thread wrap. Because it's round, I don't have to twist it. It went nice and clean. I pre-flared it. I put a nice little crease right there in the hair so that as I smash it around, it just follows that crease right up here by the hook eye. Support that shank, draw out the slack. I'm going to make sure it's even and uniform. The best way to do that is to look at your bucktail butts. The bucktail butts will show you where you're uneven in your density, and you just remanipulate it. Re-pull out the slack, smash that down. And so it can become that fast. And I'm not going to put flash in this one. I'll do it in the next one. Right. So you could build a tail for an extended body bucktail receiver in a matter of seconds. I mean, like 2 minutes, and you could have a 3-sink extension tail and make a 7-inch baitfish pattern. Try not to glue my fingers to that. But now I'm going to throw you a curveball. And what we're going to do is we're going to start to hollow tie. So you can see where these fibers end. See if I can get them to flare up there. And you can see that taper start to come into shape so that we're just going to have nothing but tips. But I'm going to show you how to hollow tie on this one, because something I noticed when I was commercial tying, the whole body of the hook is going to be hollow flies. And if you go from hollow hook to just standard ties in the tail, you'll never get rid of this unsightly gap between the two. Now, the fish never see it. Nobody sees it but you, but it'll drive you absolutely bonkers to see the difference between all of this beautiful tail section and then just like one wonky hollow tie sticking up at some weird angle. So we're going to hollow tie here. to help bridge the gap in our angles. It just makes the fly way prettier. But this is the hollow tie. I'm going to close off that R bend. I'm going to come all the way up to the shank eye because our distance and our tying points is still going to be the distance here between our tip sections. What's really nice is I get to use the shank eye to help push against the hair and actually build some volume with. I'm still going to come from the sweet spot. I don't need the super compressibility. If you remember, the sweet spot has the rigidity I want to control it. This has so much flare and trapped air, it's actually really soft because it crimps and creases so easily, you won't be able to control it. It'll essentially just flare up at 90 degrees. But that's perfect to finish a fly. Look how steep that angle is. That's perfect to finish a fly. But in the middle of a fly, in the tail of a fly, that's garbage. So stay away from this until you get to the head. The sweet spot is still the sweet spot for hollow tying. It's going to have the right stiffness, the right compressibility to control it. Now this one is going to be the hardest because I need it collapsed the most. I'll show you what I mean. So I took all the under fluff out. I'm not going to trim this one. What I'm doing right now is I'm essentially using my hand as a hair stacker. So if you have a hair stacker, you can drop it in butt down and smack, smack, smack and get them nice and flush. But I'm just pushing them up against my hand to get them close. I'm going to come up and get essentially 3 turns right behind that hook eye in the exact same place. And I'm going to pop that hair a little bit. Put a good little crease in it, good little crimp. Take my thumbnail and you're like, hey, wait a minute, this is identical. And yeah, it is. The actual application of the hair in every single step and every approach is the same. I'm going to support just behind it. I can't get up to the hook eye. That'll stop the hair from rotating it, but I can support just behind it, get a little rotation, and I'm going to take, just an extra few hard turns. Now, here's the trick. You can wrap all these butts down, but you don't have to. What I'm going to do is I'm going to keep a hand on this bobbin at all times, flexing that shank. You can see the shank wiggling. It's always under tension, a serious amount of tension, like 90% of the breaking strength, so that I can manipulate this without these 5 or 6 wraps loosening at all. So this is getting a little technical, but I'm going to smash the crap out of this hair, work it backwards, try to make it soft right here at the base, collect it all and bring my thread through just like working with belly hair and get some turns on there so that those 5 turns, 6 turns are perfectly protected. And if you come in here and you try to yank this out, you'll see those 5 turns will hold for a lifetime. They ain't ever going anywhere, but you have to be under perfect thread control for the entire process. If that stresses you out, just tie the butts down. Just get them out of there. Tie the butts down, put a drop of glue on there before you move forward. But those 5 turns are perfectly acceptable for everything if you do it with extreme precision. Now what we're going to do is we're going to build something up called a thread cone. And the trickiest part about this is, one, the cone, because the thread's round and everything, the cone's going to like collapse and roll off and collapse and roll off, which is a pain in the butt. But as you get up onto this hair, literally, see if I can do this with my fingers. How am I going to do this with my fingers? Nope. I don't have a good demo for this. I thought I did. So as you go over this hair, what you have to understand is right now my thread is literally going over the hair. It's literally going over it to control it backwards. And if I get up here at the tippy top of this cone and I pull too hard, it's going to actually go down into the hair and reflare the hair, and I lost the hollow. Right now I have hair that's literally pushing against thread, and this thread at the top has to be soft. It has to be controlled. It has to be under perfect tension, but I can't pull it straight down super hard. It'll absolutely ruin your hollow tying. And so it's super technical, but what you actually have to do is you draw thread out of your bobbin so that as I do this circle, I am no longer pulling thread off the spool. I'm tying under the tension of the bobbin, right? If I was tying at the tension, I'd slip out as I tied at the same distance. But I'm gonna tie so lightly that my bobbin nose is actually going to get closer and closer and closer and closer to the hair, closer and closer and closer to the shank. And I'm allowing that circumference of this cone to eat up that distance that I pulled out. And I can walk this down. You can't see it very well because this one's in the way, but I can also back it off. Can you see that hair just collapse ever so slightly? Collapse, 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 and then open, open, open. It's super subtle, but you'll see it as soon as we jump onto the hook here. But I'm able to simply walk it down in a very controlled manner. And if you can control it on the way down and open it up on the way up, then you can hit every angle that you need to tie for all of your hollow tying. For whatever reason, that one seemed to be lackluster. So let me show it to you on the hook, because I think you won't have the shanks fighting each other at this kind of ridiculous angle, and you'll see how that opens up and I can control that transition and angle. So right now I do gotta articulate this. I'm just gonna use a piece of 40-pound mono. It's actually fluorocarbon, I think. And because this tail section doesn't have a hook on it, I'm not worried about it being under stress, right? I'm not worried about this joint ever getting ripped out. The fish can't actually grab the back and rip it off. And so because I don't have to worry about that, I don't have this rear hook, I'm essentially just gonna try to make a nice short little articulated joint. And I'm gonna make it intentionally stiff on this lead shank. And I'm gonna use the last two to get the movement. I'm gonna use this one pulled up pretty tight to that steel, super stiff to reduce fouling. So not only am I getting an extended body, but I'm kind of building in an anti-foul mechanism in the way I'm gonna treat how it's actually attached. So instead of having a big, loose, wide loop back here so that that rear shank can move a lot, I'm gonna cinch that up super tight so that that has pretty limited travel, and all the action's gonna be out of the back too. And that's how you can take, 4-inch hair and make an 8-inch fly pretty quick with some hackles and 3 shanks that are all 1/2-inch spaced and perfect taper to your tips. It's pretty headache free. But here's the trick now. We got to match that 1/2-inch spacing. So you can kind of cheat if you need to. If you need to visualize it and see where they should be, right about where my thread already stopped, right? So you can always take hacks like that. And as you move and progress up this hook, they are going to get closer and closer together. The density of the hair that I'm tying with is always going to be relatively sparse for everything. And instead of getting it super thick and super thick, because 6/1000 can only handle so much, it can only pull so hard, and there's only so much hair you can put in one stack and still compress it and control it. The more hair you have, the stiffer it is, the harder it is to hollow tie, right? If I can just keep tying at a relatively low density, but the stacks get closer and closer together, and maybe it gets thicker, but like 5% or 10%, it's not going to be significant. It's going to be something maybe you can feel with your fingers and you take a little tough out, but it's not going to be this huge difference. And instead, you're going to get that density essentially in the frequency of the tie-in locations. So same hair, same tail, so it's all the same length. It all has the same tying characteristics. It's all responding the same under my thread. Believe it or not, that's all really useful information. Changing tails halfway through a fly becomes really difficult because all the nuances of the tail change. Still in the sweet spot, and let me show you how to walk down this hollow angle with a better visual representation here, because the shanks won't be in the way. So we're going to clean that out. stack these butts up. One, two, three. It's nice and creased. Fingers right on top. Move it around. Support the hook eye. Draw out the slack. Good flare. Compressibility control. Extra turn. 2, 3. Watch that hook point right there. I'm going to flip it backwards while it's under tension so that I don't have to do anything else to those butts and that base section. Going to bring my thread through under tension without drawing anything with it. And I'm going to wrap forward and wrap backwards. Now I did this on the shank, but you couldn't really tell because we were at the hook eye. But I just got my thread in front and then went, and all I did was make just a little Chinese finger trap. So even without a half hitch, this can't go anywhere. This can't pull out no matter what you do to it. It can't go anywhere because I went forward and backwards and locked my thread underneath locking wraps that kind of just crisscrossed on top of each other. So as I build up this cone, I'm going to be quite aggressive at first and just get some meat on that hook shank and just go as fast as I can. Then I'm going to draw out some thread and you'll see me be able to just walk this down. And anytime I need to pull out more, I'll come down onto my thread ball, pull out a bunch and go super soft. And so I can collapse that all the way down. If I say that's too much, I can just back it off and you'll start to see it open up and open up and open up. And so I can sit here and I can, essentially eyeball this, walk it down to the perfect level of angle. And then the next one's going to be, a little more open, a little more open, a little more open as you go forward. And I know that if you've ever tried hollow tying, it's infuriating to do. And this is something I wanted to talk about. We've been hitting the vise hard here for a sec. So I would encourage you all to go to my YouTube channel at some point, not self-promotion wise, but I have in my history of time, what's kind of cool is my entire history is on YouTube. Like literally, you can kind of see when I started my business, I literally made a video. And so the past 9 years of fly tying and that growth are on YouTube. And what's really cool is whenever I learned something or had like a breakthrough moment, that's when the videos came out. And what you'll see is most of the videos have nothing to do with recipes. I mean, they do, like I'm teaching a recipe, but there's something in the recipe about a technique or something that was the light bulb moment that allowed me to create something. And I did that with Bucktail. And so right now, one of the things I've always kind of disliked about the industry is we're taught by these professionals who have done this their whole life. And the problem is when you've done something for like 40 years, you forget what the struggle was like, or you forget where you struggled. You kind of forget the hurdles you had to jump. It's like, oh, I've been teaching this for so long, it just kind of comes together, right? And you just slap it together and people are like, how'd you do that? Like your hollow ties are perfect. And I feel like, I've been teaching Bucktail hard for like 3 or 4 years now. Sometimes it feels like when I talk about it, it's missing the light bulb moments that I used to have. And I don't know how to get them back. Like that came together. I wanted it to be more extreme. I wanted it to pop. I wanted you to see the hair collapse, but it was just kind of at the shape I needed. And when I took it off, it kind of just moved a little. And I was like, well, great. Not the world's greatest tying demo, was it? But it's like perfectly tapered. I don't know what to do about it. And so when you're interested in this stuff, it's not that those videos, it's not like, well, I wasn't as good of a tyer then, so you shouldn't watch them. Like, yeah, I wasn't as good of a tyer then, but they have the breakthrough moments that a lot of people who are trying to learn are also at the same hurdle. They're also trying to go over that same moment. And so being able to learn from someone who's kind of in this peer state instead of always looking down or up to the professionals who sometimes can't articulate things the way you need it articulated because they forgot what it was like to struggle. I don't know if that makes sense. You guys are all muted. Sometimes it's just, I've been talking at this computer for a long time. Someone unmute themselves. I need to hear a voice.
Here, I got a question for you.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Joel asked about not using a bead when you put your articulation onto the hook
Yeah,
with
yeah.
your wire, and he asked why you didn't use a bead.
So with the beads for me, oh man. So when I did the Kelly Gallup stuff, right, and I started my business doing articulated trout flies, the bead to me is like this spacing idea handed down from the trout articulated trout industry, and I've never understood the true purpose of it. And so when I did it imitating other tires, right? So I always had a bead because every tire who tied articulated trout streamers has a bead between his hooks. Now, most of the time, they'll float you some low-key BS, like it reduces the fouling, stuff like that. Most of the time, what they're really trying to do is they're just trying to get more distance between the two hooks so that you have a front hook for when they eat the head, you have a tail hook for when they nip the tail. So the bead is using a spacer joint to create distance between the two hooks to make the fly more successful in its fish catching approach. Right now, as we go over this, this is way overexposed. This perfect half-inch spacing, I am creating the taper on the tips of this fly by that half-inch spacing. And the moment you put a bead in that joint, you've ruined that spacing. And I can't guarantee that perfectly symmetrical silhouette. And when I put that shank on there, I specifically made it way tighter than you would think of for an articulated fly, because I'm not trying to articulate the fly. I'm trying to extend the body. And when I put that shank on, I wanted a tight shank right here against the hook so that it doesn't wrap under the bend. But then I have these two loose R bends sticking behind it to get some articulated swim and movement out of it. But I specifically made that joint tight as an anti-fouling mechanism. And then there's no bead there, because if there's a bead there, I can't make it tight like that. And I lose control over the half-inch spacing, because we're taking this not from kind of the trout realm, but literally from saltwater monofilament tying. And when you tie on the mono, right, you just take the mono and you just put it on and tie it back on. So there is no joint, there is no loose connection. This is like a solid 50 piece or 50-pound piece of monofilament, right? So there are no joints, there are no articulation. The swim of the beast, the craziest thing about the beast is all the swim is in that tapered hair. All of the swim is in that, the fact that the bucktail is tapered. And we're going to build a nice big bulky head to push water over those tips, and they will swim all over the place regardless if there's joint or loose connections or any of that. So
Anything else, anybody?
Gunnar, when you started, you were off and running almost immediately on the purchase of the deer hair or the bucktail.
yeah.
Could you re-articulate both what attributes you're looking for and what you're trying to avoid in the purchase of the bucktail now that you're on the recorded session? Okay, because I'd like to hear that again. And only, I'm talking about the most basic top 3 or 4 things you're looking for that are positive, and the couple of things that you're looking for that are the negatives when trying to buy the bucktails when you walk into the shops and you're there in person.
Yeah. Oh, it's going to be hard off the top of my head. Let me. I got so much stuff in there. Close your eyes. Don't look. It's a little bit gross how much stuff I've accumulated.
Welcome to the fly time world.
I know, it's ridiculous, isn't it?
I was about
Buy
to
your
say
own
that's
fly,
quite
save
the
money.
cabin.
Buy your own fly,
The
save money.
disease.
Gunner, I was going to say that's quite the cabinet.
It is. So when I stopped tying commercially, I started resale, and I tried to do like a curated shop essentially for streamer materials. And so I needed a place to store it when we moved, because my old house had an unfinished basement. So I just put up pegboard everywhere and hung everything. And then when we moved, I have this like 10 foot by 10 foot office space, which isn't a lot. It's like I have to fit a lot of crap in here. So it is a nice cabinet and it works. So one of the things I look for. So obviously the first thing I need as a tire is length. And the only reason I say that is because bucktails for the longest time were marketed for Clouser minnows. Because it's one of the catch-all, tie-all, first patterns anybody learns to do, works literally everywhere for almost everything. And so you would get these kind of short 4-inch hairs that were relatively stiff. And unfortunately, just in the natural variation of deer, that is common. Like when I resold hair, I would buy like 100 bucktail from Hairline, and probably 70 to 75 were 4 inches or less. Probably 75 were 3 3/4. And about 25 were over 4. And out of those 25, only about 2 or 3 were over 4.5. And so just on the scale, like, if you had like your statistical chart of standard deviation, I need like 2 standard deviations above average just to be able to tie true to shape hollow flies. And one of the reasons why is because there's this rule that that I kind of talk about, which is trust the flare. And the problem is you can only trust, and what I mean, so like when we do a hollow fly, we take that bucktail and we flip it backwards. What you'll see is if you ever see me tie a beast, that hair is like sticking up here. And you're looking at the pattern as I'm building this fly, and like for like 10 ties in a row or like almost 90-degree angles, and you're like, like that doesn't look good. But then when you get it wet, because it's not uniformly stiff, right? I built the volume, but then I got the action and the silhouette and the taper. And you can only do that with long hair. You can only do that with long hair. When hair is short, it's stiff. It's almost like, if I could describe it this way. So like short hair is like this, but the tip's right here. Long hair is the same, but it's longer. Does that make sense? Like imagine you took a bucktail fiber and you only looked at the bottom half. The bottom half of 5.5-inch hair is the same bottom half of 3.5-inch hair. They're the same diameter, whether it's 3.5 or 5, but the 5 doesn't stop here. It goes way up here. And so it just gets thinner and thinner and thinner, more and more movement. And so it's really hard to make a beast with hair that's only this long because it's so stiff. You have to be super accurate and you won't get much of the swim on it. Short hair is excellent for finishing a fly. It's excellent for stabilizer wings. It's excellent for clousers, but I have to have the length because I need it to be soft enough that I can get volume, but still get the swim. It's almost like the butts are the same no matter what length it is. So the first thing I have to find is long hair. And that really sucks because everybody's looking for long hair. And it's just by nature, not a lot of it. So like when I touch this tail, like I don't know why I saved it. Like I don't know what to do with it. It's probably 3.5 inches. The only thing I could think to use it for would be like a 3D fly where I'm stacking a belly section and I want nice short hair that doesn't foul. But I don't tie 3D flies very often. I tend to tie in this big mature sucker style fly. And that's kind of the niche that my tying pushes me towards based on my forage. And so this tail is like, I got like 50 of these and they're essentially going to sit there just because the length is suitable for different flies. It's just not suitable for my flies. Now I could branch out from that and be a little less picky, but it's tricky. The other thing I would say is I want it soft. So one of the problems that I have when you order online is you might be able to guarantee the length. Like you might say, hey, I want a double A grade tail. They have it sorted. It's guaranteed to be 4.5 inches. That's great. Like I could tie a beast with that. But if you get it and it's so stiff that again, I'm not gonna get this. I'm gonna get, it becomes really hard to build these smooth, elegant shapes essentially you're restricted to this, the accuracy of your ties, the accuracy you're gonna get. And the problem is the muskie industry likes that stiff stuff. If you ever look at the muskie guys, I don't actually tie muskie flies. If you watch my patterns, I tie saltwater flies that I fish for muskie. I am very much so a saltwater fly tyer. Even though I'm in Minnesota and I've never fly fished the salt a day in my life, but I tie flies the way saltwater guys tie flies. The muskie guys will take a really stiff tail, they dress it they put 3 times more hair on the hook than I ever would, maybe 4 times. And they just pack it on and pack it on and pack it on and pack it on. So their 4-inch hair that's really stiff, they're making these huge silhouettes, and the whole fly, it kind of gets pushed and pulled through the water as like a unit. It almost becomes like a solid plastic lure made out of hair, if you will. If you've ever fished like a beaver bait, the way the gear guys will put so much material on there, instead of acting like individual fibers, it acts like a solid, and the water hits it and moves over it, and the whole joint shank build swims. It's like, if you think about like game changers are tied so dense that the water doesn't go through the game changer, the water has to go around the game changer. Now you can do that with bucktail, but you have to tie it in super dense. And so if you have 4.5-inch hair, 4-inch hair, but it was really rigid and stiff, that's what the muskie guys actually like, because they're building essentially mega bucktail game changers like that. I don't tie like that. My flies are super sparse. You can see through this thing. You can see all the skeletalized stuff. And it's because I am supremely concerned about castability. I have to be able to cast my flies because my river is probably a 1/4 mile wide and 6 to 8 feet deep. And the runs and the holes that the muskies are in are 80 feet wide, 70 feet wide. And essentially I'm swinging almost like steelhead style, 6, 7, 8 feet down. And I have to be able to make these 90-foot casts with the 12-inch lure so that I can systematically approach the water. I'm not picking bank shots. It's the farthest thing from like the articulated trout world with a 30-foot cast where it's a smack strip. Oh, I didn't move a fish, pick it up. It's like I have to systematically approach this water almost like steelhead fishing out west, but I can't roll cast this 12-inch fly on a skagit head. It just doesn't work. So I'm in Wonderland, to be honest with you. I went down the rabbit hole, and I don't know. My whole system's just different. So I tie saltwater flies. I'm looking for the length is first and foremost, and then softness. If you added a third category, it would be I want just a little bit of wave to it, just a little bit. Really straight hair is hard to tie with. It shows all of your mistakes, and the illusion of bulk isn't there because you get strands instead of strands. Does that make sense? Like as soon as you have a little bit of waviness, it almost covers overs and bleeds over yourself so that you can tie sparser. If everything's perfectly straight and it all just sticks out perfectly straight, you have to use more hair to get the same silhouette and illusion. So length, softness, slight wave.
Got a few more for you, Gunner.
Yeah.
First of all, John Wright, he says in the military, the flying game, we call the light bulb moment as the aha moment. Yeah, you get further away from your own, you forget what it was like. Hard when you're trying to teach. So that's a comment he made, and then I've got a couple of questions. William asked if you have 2 tails with 5-inch hair, but one is sparse and the other is really full, what do you choose?
So the problem is I don't throw tails away, which is why there's probably about 200 in there. But one of the things I had mentioned is it's really hard, especially when you're learning, to say, hey, we're going to use this for the back half, and then we're going to use this for the front half. Because as soon as you change tails, you just change tying characteristics. So if one tail is fuller and it's going to allow you to tie the entire fly start to finish, and the way we're building this one, where we're using the different spacing to get the taper tips, use the fullest one that's going to allow you to tie the one fly start to finish. That way you're not changing tying characteristics. Now, what you can do is I have a pattern that I did a video for 2 years ago called the Muskie Double. And what I do is I have 3 tails that I'm going to use, and they're all different lengths and they have all different characteristics. And I just cycle through them 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 3, 3. And what you're doing then is because we're trying to build this skeletalized perfect system where we have essentially perfect lines coming out, I have to have the same tail to do that. But as soon as you go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, now you get like one characteristic, another characteristic, another characteristic, but then they repeat. And because they repeat, it all creates a uniform output because we've kind of systemized the differences. It's kind of a weird way to think about it, but if you have weird tails and you have other weird tails, you can cycle through your weird tails to get a good end result. But if you're going to try to build like a extended body deceiver, bulkhead, hollow fly, beast fly, it's way beneficial in the learning stage to use one tail start to finish with the exact same characteristics, so you're not throwing any curveballs because it'll mess you up.
All right, a couple more questions. Have you ever tried tying your streamers with Arctic foxtail hair?
I have a fly called the skinny dipper, which I typically use it. When I use it as an overwing or a stabilizer wing, or I'll use it to counter shade my trout stuff. I've never used it. Let's say you were to take this pattern, you wanted to scale it down. I'm going to do some hollow ties just to get it to the head so we can finish this thing. So like if you wanted to scale this fly down and you're like, I'm going to tie that in like a 2-aught with, one trailer shank and tied out of Art Fox. I tend not to do that. I'm trying to think if I don't have any super useful experience with Fox. It's yeah, my skinny dipper is about the only pattern I've used it on. It tends to be heavy in hand, would be my only concern if you overuse it and how you use it.
Want to change cameras?
Okay.
Yeah, sure. Sorry.
Question, when will you be publishing a Bucktail tying book?
Bob's got it, man. Bob's got the book. So one of the things that I have realized is, as my YouTube stuff and as I do seminars and stuff like this, is I try to boil things down to tying technique or tying skills or kind of platform building instead of recipes. And of course I have recipes and it would be cool to do a recipe book, but I've played around with the idea of doing like a systematic approach to fly tying and a systematic approach to streamer fishing, because that wasn't a joke when I said, I essentially not only tie saltwater flies and fish them for muskie, but I also fish East Coast saltwater style. And that's new, right? So like coming from the Kelly Gallup world, I very much so used to be a smack the bank, jerk strip retrieve, always work it downstream. And essentially in the past 3 or 4 years of stillwater fishing, that's gotten beat out of me because that is not stillwater technique. And the East Coast guys, which are always fishing, stillwater or fishing from the boat or fishing from shore, their retrieve style, the way they set the hook, the way they tie their flies, it's essentially I'm just a saltwater guy trapped in Minnesota, which is fine.
Al Beatty asks or makes a comment, first of all, excellent presentation and information, and he'd like to know if possible, what's your day job?
This kind of. I have a 6-year-old and a 1-year-old. And when we started having kids, I tried to run my commercial tying operation while taking care of them. And that was brutal. And so basically when my wife would get home from work, I would go in the basement and tie until my, until my arms fell off or I got a migraine from not wearing my reading glasses. Learned that one. If you can't tell, I'm wearing them right now. But after that, I started my curated shop and ran that until this year. And our 1-year-old, he's had some health problems that has made this past year difficult, and so took down my online store. Been fortunate enough to travel and teach some classes here and there, but most of it is just working for Rio, getting flies manufactured and designing them appropriately and sourcing materials and trying to help design stuff for just industry work.
Okay.
It does not pay very well, but industry work.
Okay. I'm gonna combine a couple of questions here. First of all, how do you get those flies down in the deep holes? Do you add weight? And also, Robert wants to know what kind of glue you're using.
Sure. So the glue's easy. The glue is CA plus. It's just Zap-A-Gap. You can use medium viscosity or you can use thin. Be careful with the thin. This stuff is runny as all get out. But what's really cool is we're using monofilament thread, which is obviously just extruded plastic, right? Most threads are, especially your GSP and everything. They're all just plastic. And CA plus will soak in, what's the word? Bond and kick, and it'll actually weld it. And so what's really cool is if you come into a fly like this, let's say you caught, I don't know, some fish on it and you want to save the hook, you want to retie something fell apart, and you take a razor blade to it. When you cut the monofilament, it's not like you cut it and then strands break off and you unwrap it. If you use CA glue on it, you'll cut it and then you'll have to like saw through it, and then you'll pull up like a chunk of melted plastic. It's like the coolest thing. So I use that, especially on like my thread dams for my hollows, so that I don't just have a bunch of small strands that are holding the hair, but I have a plastic cone that's been melted and fused together that teeth can hit and pliers can grab, and it ain't going anywhere. It's a solid chunk of plastic. And then, so I talked about how musky guys tend to build their flies packed so dense with stiff hair, they can't sink those things. They cannot. Those guys will be throwing like a 600 grain, 8 inch per second line, and that fly will literally sit there while that line sinks down. It'll just sit there. And then, yes, it'll start to go down. They can get it down probably 3 or 4 feet. But when they're tied this sparse, you can sink them, right? So that saltwater style allows me to get it deeper than the musky style, just right off the bat. You'll also see my heads. I'm about to show you how to do a reverse bulkhead here. My heads are not like a Buford, which is like a dense, almost like deer belly, flat-faced, water push style head. That's a lot of buoyancy. I'm essentially just doing a hollow fly, but I left the butts in a little bit long, right? I'm literally not doing too much more to make sure that this hair in the front can't collapse, but I am getting water push. I am getting more density and bulk up front to swim the hair, but it's not so much you can't sink it. Now, there is truth to the fact that naturals are harder to sink than synthetics. And so I have a few patterns if I need to get really deep that I tie like Sadati Slammer, which is just all synthetic. Essentially, it's a 3D stacked baitfish pattern out of synthetics that's weighted so that I can get down like 10 feet. But most of the river holes, I need to get down about 6. And I fish about a 480 grain, 10 inch per second full sink striper line. And just last week, I built a 600 grain, 10 inch per second, 30 foot full sink shooting head for doing exactly this. So it's definitely, again, Alice in Wonderland. It's kind of like, who I need to do that. So I don't know. And I've caught so many fish, fish in a foot of water, 2 feet of water, intermediate lines. And they'll hang on the shelf and they'll be at the bank, and I have different creeks and stuff that I can wade fish for them. But when I'm in the big river, you got to get deep. So it's not that I have solved the problem, it's that I'm trying to solve the problem, which is why I just made that line a week ago. But yeah, the 480 to 600 grain full sinking lines, which are not fun to cast, but they'll do it. They will sink a musky fly down into that 6 to 8 foot range if you gotta do it.
We'll let you get finished here on this.
Yeah, I know. I told you, if you let me talk about it for an hour and a half, I will. It's a scary thought. So
Gunner, with those shanks being open like that, do you ever put a split shot on one of the shanks to help you get it down?
oh, interesting. Coming out the back here?
Yes, correct. Or in the middle, you could just drop one on the tail, one in the middle, and that would allow it to go down uniformly.
Sure. So one of the cool things that I played with back in the day, if you can see this, this is actually not tied on monofilament or shanks, it's tied on tubes. And the tubes are in sections, so they're jointed. And when I first started playing with this, Blaine Chocolate had sent me a message because this is something that he had also worked on while he was developing his Game Changer series. And he was like, if you put tungsten beads between those tube sections, you'll get a lot of weight in the rear of the fly so that when you stop the fly, the tungsten beads will push that tail forward and the whole tail will it'll whoosh serpentine because the weight will push the fly forward. So if you were going to do it, I don't know about the split shot on the shanks, but you have that steel that's undressed that you could totally try that with. But the tube fly version would allow you to slip weighted beads between the tubes, and you could get some really wanky, cool stuff going, like weird stuff that flies do. What I have seen is when you look at these hollow flies and you actually get into the shank of it, you can just take like 030 lead wire, and I would have to really be mean to this hair to get it out of the way to put some lead on there. But you could definitely put, 2 turns between each stack on the hook shank and things like that if you needed to get it down. But most of the time, it depends on the action you want. But one of the coolest things to do, and this is something that Kelly Gallup really did hit home and teach, is they fish those sinking lines in Montana, even like 30-foot T8, that which is like 6 inches per sec sinking line, but with a zoo cougar. And the zoo cougar has this classic muddler style blunt faced head made out of deer belly hair that's buoyant. So you have this buoyant fly getting pulled down, and you always have this almost like it wants freedom from the line, but the line always pulls it back. And so these kind of neutrally buoyant or buoyant flies paired with sinking lines does have like this pretty special action reaction, even if they do limit your depth. Just something to, I don't know, it's all it's all anybody's guess is sometimes what it feels like. There's so many opinions and so much variation out there, but we'll go a color that I can actually see, something like that. I'll show you guys how to make essentially a bulkhead, and there's 2 ways to do it, and I can show you both, but this way's a lot harder, so I prefer to show you the other if I can. But a bulkhead is essentially a hollow fly technique, but you leave the butts in, and you use the butts to double up the density at the front. Now, because you're leaving the butts in, I want maximum compressibility so that it acts like belly hair. We kind of talked about this earlier, how it's haphazard and accidental for my sake, but you get the most buoyancy at the head to balance out the hook. But I'm going to take it from this lower section. Now this tail, I kind of pre-selected it because it has similar characteristics to the white one. So I'm just trying to make that transition as smooth as possible. I'm still going to take out the fluff. Now right here, I can just kind of mess these up a little bit. Do you see that? I just gave them a little bit of taper and a little bit of roughness. And the reason why is just so that you don't have like a super clean line. Can you see that line that starts at the head and goes all the way through the fly? Kind of just get rid of that a little bit. And I'm going to leave those back like a 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch. But the tying technique of catching it crimping it, thumbnail on top, moving it around the hook, drawing out all the slack, few extra hard turns is all the same. But now the density up here at the head is twice as much. And what's really cool is we're using the fattest, thickest part of the hair, right? The butt section of that fly rod, if you will, to create all that water push. And yet you still get the action out of the tips. Now you still have to hollow tie it just like you normally would, which is a pain in the tushy. But what's really cool is we're going to do that again. And so this next one is going to help me control this. So if I can just get that like close, I can actually let that open up and flare out more than you would think you would want, because there's going to be another one that goes right on top of it. So when you watch these bucktail butts that are going to get left in here, they're going to push on that hollow fly and collapse it a little bit. So it's okay to leave that one open, knowing that the next stage is going to beat it up. And I wish you could see how hard I'm reefing on this. This hair, especially when it's up by that hook eye, it's so hard to control it. Like, get in there and work the crap out of that thing, rip the hook out of your vise, like mess with this stuff. The hair won't do what you want. You have to make it do what you want. And what's really cool is right here at the hook eye, I can actually use that hook eye as essentially my cone, right? So when you have to build this hollow cone on your shank, you just have this really low diameter shank to build this cone. It's really hard, but I have this huge 6/0 hook eye, which just has a massive amount of volume and surface area to push my thread cone against. So I can actually get a really clean, tight to hook eye finish on a fly like this. And I don't have to worry about like crowding that eye. Now that is actually probably 10% denser now that I look at it. I was probably too eager to finish the fly. But that is gonna push some serious water. And you can just see we just have tips starting right here at the color change, if I can get them to line up, that go all the way down to that tip section, because we just used the same hair, that was the same consistency, that was the same characteristics, and all we did was change the spacing and our tie-in angles. Now, right now, this looks a little gross. I'll grant you that. And what we're gonna do is, part of that is static, and part of that is the kind of innate stiffness, and the tips are all perfectly straight. And if you go and you get this wet under the water, that's the only difference between like these two flies. The only difference between these two flies, and I'll do it and post a picture on my social media tomorrow, and I'll tag you guys in it so you can find it. But the only difference is just wetting those tips, and that'll just sink right up. And what's interesting is people tend to think, and you'll see pictures of this all the time, they'll take a fly, get it wet, take it out of the water and take a picture of that. And they're like, that's what it looks like in the water. But that's not true. That's not true at all. As soon as that's what it looks like when you cast it. But when something in the air and something in the water, there's no difference to the amount of pressure that's on one or the other until you put some current on it, or you strip it, or you pull it. In which case, yeah, it's going to breathe and it's going to undulate. But when you get something wet and then you take it out, now you have, and I'm talking off the cuff, and it's probably not true, but you have like the hydrogen bonds of the water molecules, right? Because water likes to stick to itself, getting sucked down, and it's compressing all that soft material. But that's not what it looks like in the water. Now, when you get this wet and hang dry it, and it slicks back, you're not taking a picture of it wet. You're getting it wet, letting it dry, and you've tamed all the materials, and now that silhouette is what it looks like as you pull it through the water. Now, it'll still compress and undulate a little bit more and less than that as the water flows over it, but you're creating the most true to shape accuracy that you can by getting it wet and hang drying it. All of this straight edge pokey stuff, that's not what it looks like. So there's two errors. One is not getting it wet at all. and thinking that it's gonna look straight out like that, which is not true. The other one's getting it wet and then taking a picture of it soaking wet with the water dripping off of it, because that's not what it looks like either.
All
But
right, got two more questions. We better cut it at that, and then we'll have to do a wrap. But Anthony says the late great Gary LaFontaine used full sinking lines with topwater poppers catch lake smallmouth bass using the technique he described.
yeah,
He asked
Yep.
the question, why do you not add fly eyes to your beast flies?
part of it's because it changes the head. It's really hard to. So this looks high and tight and flat, right? It almost looks two-dimensional, but that's just because I store it in a plastic bag. It's actually built 360. And so if you take a 360-degree head that's quite bulky, it becomes really hard to get eyes to adhere to that without changing the silhouette. You can take, these flat eyes and squish the head, but now I've lost the blunt face silhouette that I was trying to achieve. And so in my time, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but in my time, I put the silhouette as the highest priority in my time. And so if eyes distort the silhouette from the forage I'm trying to imitate, which right now is suckers and chubs, creek chubs, then that is working against me. You also have to understand that my water clarity is about 6 inches. At best about 1.5 feet, and that's if it doesn't rain for about 2 months. But it's horrible. It's really bad, tannic stained, and then all the Wisconsin creeks that dump in are all clay based. It's chocolate milk, year-round chocolate milk, or coffee. It's one or the other. And so the eyes aren't a successful trigger for me. If it takes away from the action and the silhouette, it's a no-go. When I do add eyes, but I want to maintain the shape, I will use jungle cock. And so I'm able to maintain that kind of blunt face shape of, like, say, a mullet or something, or a sucker or a creek chub. They're not as realistic, but they're suggestive and they're cool. But that feather eye doesn't distort the silhouette. If I am tying a bait fish imitation that is high and tight, and so the head does match the silhouette, then I will put eyes on it. And so I'm all over the place, but I don't see them as like a trigger that's so successful that has to be integrated into every pattern to make that pattern better. If it impacts, at the cost of silhouette being my priority, I won't do it.
Okay.
And if you have sorry, I know you're like, everybody wants to go to bed. If you have like crystal clear water, so that's something to argue for, right? If you have clear water and your predators have big eyes and they know what that crap they're looking for, eyes can be super important. They're just not important to me. That doesn't mean they're not important. That's just my water, my thing. And what you have to, especially in the musky sense, if you're considering the fact that I have, 6, let's just say a foot of visibility, the flies initially landing in these 6 to 8 foot holes, what are the fish doing? They're looking up. They're not looking at a fish sideways. They're not able to come up on it and inspect it. If they follow it, they're literally tailing behind it. Everything in my water and the way the fly is being presented is all about silhouette and swim. And I don't think I've given the realism aspect as a triggering mechanism for where I fish. It's such a low priority for me.
All
So,
right.
not right or wrong, but time and place.
Yep. You are getting some excellent reviews here. People have really enjoyed your presentation, and they are saying that this is one of the most informative of the classes that we've done, and I have to agree that I've learned.
It was really hard. You guys were all muted. Normally, there's like, a live room, and I can, like, when someone's glazed over, I can pick on them or like, hey, shape up, and but this is hard stuff. Talking to a computer. So
learn.
I'm glad. Bucktail is it's my favorite. Like if we're gonna do anything, it's my favorite. So
Well, I'm gonna
Thank-
take another shot at it. I watched your YouTube videos and tried it and put it away for another day, but now it's time to try it for sure.
play with it.
So I'm gonna remove you from spotlight here real quick,
Sure.
and if anybody's got some final words, personal words for you, go for it. If not, we'll get ready to shut down.
Gunner, quick question on the eyes. Have you ever used doll eyes that you can glue into the hair without changing the compression of the head?
Nice, William. Yes. So Hairline came out with their posted dome eyes last year, which is just a doll eye, just rebranded and whatever. And I had never tried them. Like, so EP had manufactured these doll eyes forever for doing his EP bait fish for saltwater fishing, and I never used them. I don't know why, but I didn't have a wholesaler to get them from, so I just kind of like wrote it off. And I absolutely love them. The only problem I have had is that I changed too many things at one time because as I introed this, I talked about how important it is to play with bucktail. If you get rigid in the recipe and you're not reacting to the hair, you're going to be frustrated because the hair is going to act differently. Well, the problem is I don't just play with bucktail, but I play with all fly tying almost to the point of too much that when I mess with something, I don't add one thing new. I'll add like 5 things new. And so what I started doing is I would do these composite bucktail strung fuzzy fiber, which is synthetic bulkheads, and I would use the synthetic as a base for the doll eye to stick into, but they had too much head resistance to be ideally castable. And I had done these really cool bulkhead. They were musky doubles with a bucktail bulkhead, and I used E6000 and Zap Goo with the doll eyes, but I would cut the post short so the post was like 1/8 of an inch, and they were fantastic. They were sick. The only reason I would not do it is it's just head weight. And so if you want to fly to suspend perfectly, even the plastic and the glue in there, it does add just a little bit of head dip. And then obviously it's time. But if you go through, if you go through my Instagram for like the past 6 months, you'll see those posted dome eyes, which are just doll eyes, and probably like 1 out of 6 posts or so. But I use them, just not all the time.
One of the things that we do is we take the doll eye and put a little bit of heat shrink tubing on it,
Yeah.
and then slide that through, put the other doll eye on it, and then put your glue. And that actually is a small air chamber that allows the head to float.
So you're
I do
making
this
a
in salt
weightless
water.
dumbbell eye?
Basically, yes, but you're
But
using the doll eye.
yeah. So do you tie the shrink tubing to the hook shank, or is the shrink tubing just going through the head material?
No, that's tied to the shank. And
Okay.
you're putting your eyes in the side, and it gives you a little air pocket then that counterbalances for the little bit of difference in the doll eye weight.
Are the eyes glued into the tubing?
Yes.
Sweet. So
Just around the edge, so you still have the air pocket.
yeah. I tried this, man. I took what was
I do
it?
this in salt water. That's why this presentation is excellent. It hits very similar
Thanks,
because
William.
I go after big uh redfish and some of the pelagics, and I do that with some of the eyes to throw those things around floating vegetation, like when we go after mahi.
Yeah. So one of the things I did is if you use junction tubing from the tube fly world, I tried to do that with the posted domes, but I didn't glue them. And so it only worked in size like large. And then the tubing would relax too much after it's been on there for like 2 or 3 days. And when they got wet, the eyes could slip on and off. And so I
Well,
gave up.
with the
So
glue that
heat shrink
allows that
tubing and
tubing to
glue.
be a little rigid.
Heat shrink and glue.
Okay.
Sorry,
Not
didn't mean to, just throwing that out.
Yeah, that's sweet.
I have one last question for you, Gunner.
Shoot.
Can we get you to kind of semi-commit right now to come back on when we get started next fall?
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite things to talk about, if you want to change the subject, is pheasant skins. If anybody wants to learn how to tie a pheasant, bugger jig, a crayfish, and a baitfish pattern out of one skin, it's my favorite thing. I absolutely love it. But if you fish bass, smallmouth, crappie, channel cats, any warm water fish, and they work for trout, but it's just like if you fish any warm water, still water, and you just drop that thing in there, oh, it's lights out. But it would be like under the title of minimalist fly tying with a single bird's skin, creating 3 different forage profiles. I love it. It'd be so fun.
Sounds good. All right, I'm gonna hold you to that. I'll be getting in touch with you.
All right, Rick.
So, with that, thank you all for coming and being faithful followers of our program. It's been a real delight, and you've all been a real delight. And I think we got some good stuff out this year, and I look forward to next year or next fall, and even making it better. So with that, unless anybody's got something absolutely earth-shattering, we'll call it a night. And thank you, Gunner. That was great.
Thanks for having me, guys.
You bet.
Thanks, Rick.
You bet.
Thank you, Rick.
See you later.